Success changes people, not metaphorically, I mean, like structurally. And one of the strangest parts is that the changes usually look positive from the outside. Okay. The audience is growing, the company is growing, opportunities are getting bigger, and people start respecting you and treating you differently. Momentum is there. And because momentum feels good, most people assume the direction must be correct. That's the dangerous part because success doesn't only reward behavior, it rewards identity as well. And if you repeat a rewarded identity long enough, eventually it stops feeling like a role and it starts feeling like you. Earlier in the series, we talked about drift, how capable people slowly become somebody they never really intended to become. But the deeper question underneath that is why does the drift keep getting faster even after people notice it? Why don't smart people simply course correct once they realize something feels off about this? Okay, there is a reason. Success creates reinforcement pressure, and reinforcement pressure quietly rewrites who you are. Okay, I spent 20 years touring the world as a professional mentalist. And eventually, I realized the same stuff that makes a performance succeed on stage is exactly the same psychology that shapes identity in normal life and at business, at companies, and everywhere. Human beings repeat whatever gets rewarded. That's the mechanism. Not because they're weak, because reinforcement is one of the strongest psychological forces on planet Earth, and it'll work when we're an interplanetary species and an interstellar species. That will still happen. Once you understand that, like clearly, a huge amount of modern ambition starts making a lot more sense, especially among highly capable people. All right, so that's what we're digging into. Section one. Reinforcement changes who you are. Okay. At first, most ambitious people are experimenting different ideas, different behaviors, different communication styles, different ways of moving through the world. Then something works, right? Maybe people respond better, the audience gets bigger, money shows up, status is going up, opportunities are coming by more often. Now, reinforcement enters the feedback loop, and reinforcement changes behavior real fast. Okay. But what most people are missing is that the repeated behavior eventually changes identity too. um, you don't you're not just who you are, you're also what you do. And then when you behave different, you see yourself differently. So you behave your way into being somebody different, right? That's the deeper shift. You stop thinking, this is something I'm doing, and you start thinking, this is who I am. And that transition matters big time because once identity becomes attached to success and external situations, changing becomes psychologically expensive. And this is where ambitious people get trapped by their own momentum, not because they lack freedom, but because success creates attachment, especially when the rewards are public. Okay. So, section two, the audience problem. Not you. You're not a problem, but audience problem. Okay. Creators experience this all the time. Okay. Because a certain personality works online and a certain tone gets engagement. Kind of like, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about stuff like this, and I'm going to be doing stupid faces like that. Ooh, right? That's what I'm talking about. Okay. And a certain emotional posture grows faster. I've always got to be upbeat and happy. And that certain version of the self becomes rewarded big time often. So naturally, they feed it again and again and again. And eventually, something subtle happens. The audience starts rewarding the performance more than the person. And that creates a deep fragmentation because now there are two identities, the human being and the rewarded construct. Now, I experienced this firsthand unintentionally at first because the intention was I'm going to be a performer. I'm going to be performing at a lot of colleges. I want a buffer between me and the show. So I'm going to come up with a stage persona, a stage name, Johnny Savant, like an idiot savant, but spelled with a Z. Okay. So then Johnny Savant became the stage character, but then became who I was off stage to book the show, but then became who I was with friends because all my friends were performers and they get it and they all go along. But then Jonathan Pritchard wasn't wasn't there anymore. Okay, Johnny Savant was what got rewarded, but in my head, I was still Jonathan Pritchard. So everybody I knew, everybody that loved me, I felt like they loved Johnny Savant, which was a persona I was putting on, not an expression of who I was, right? Because the human being and the character often becomes, I mean, he was more economically valuable than the real person underneath because Johnny Savant got booked, Jonathan Pritchard got nothing. Okay. That is psychologically dangerous because now authenticity starts feeling risky, right? If this version of me built the audience, what happens if I stop being that version? That question traps people for years, and I was trapped that way for a decade. All right. And this isn't just limited to performers or creators. I mean, founders experience the exact same thing. Right. So, section 3, success narrows flexibility because at the beginning, founders are usually builders. They're creative, adaptive, experimental. Then the company grows, and now they become operator, manager, leader, decision stabilizer, emotional regulator for the whole organization. Everybody's looking for me, to me for direction, right? And over time, the system itself starts depending on that version of them. And that's when flexibility starts disappearing, not externally, but inside, because changing now feels super dangerous to everything they've built. If this identity built the company, what happens if I'm not that version of me? Okay. So, again, that question, that silent belief that I have to be that person, restructures how they behave. And most people never consciously notice that happening as it's happening. Because again, externally from the outside, everything looks great. It looks successful. That's what makes this so difficult to see. Success hides fragmentation extremely well, okay? Especially from other people and often from the person themselves. For the longest time, I was super happy being Johnny Savant. That Jonathan Pritchard never did a damn thing for me, but Johnny Savant, whoo boy, he's amazing, right? That leads to a whole other important point, which is the smarter somebody is, the easier it becomes to rationalize over time this fragmentation. Okay. So, section 4, why intelligent people get trapped longer. Smart people are incredibly good at explaining stuff. That's just it. They can justify almost anything. Why this change to the schedule is just for now. Why the stress is necessary. Why the change in who I am makes total sense. Why the exhaustion is simply part of being ambitious. And some of those explanations are partially true. They can be true. That's what makes them so convincing. But fragmenting who you are compounds, but quietly, right? Because you can survive misaligned for years if you're highly competent, right? Especially if external rewards are getting bigger and bigger, because external success creates psychological noise. And noise makes internal signals harder to hear. That's why the to thy own self be true, every time I've messed up my life, and I've done it a lot, every single time there was just a tiny, tiny, quiet voice telling me, you're messing up. Don't do it. Not a good idea. But the reward part of my brain was like, yeah, let's go. This is fantastic. All right. So that noise, eventually you just stop asking, does this feel right for me? Does this feel aligned with where I want to be and who I want to be? And then you start asking, well, how do I keep this going? Right? How do I maintain momentum? And that is a very different question. Momentum becomes the operating system that's running your life. Reflection disappears, all right? And once reflection disappears, drift gets way out of hand, right? This is one of the reasons why so many ambitious people eventually experience a weird form of exhaustion that sleeping more can't touch, all right? Because the exhaustion isn't physical, it's structural, it's like spiritual, right? The person carrying the life no longer trusts the identity underneath all of it. And that changes everything. Which brings us to section 5, the hidden cost. This is the hidden price of success most people never discuss like openly or honestly with themselves or other people, okay? Success increases consequences, and bigger or more consequences create a more rigid identity, because the more people depend on a version of you, the harder it becomes to change that version. That's true in companies, in relationships, in audiences, in leadership, in families, social systems, everywhere. YouTube channels. I built this channel because I didn't like the version of the channel I built to more than 8,000 subscribers. Okay. Now, eventually, a lot of highly capable people get trapped inside that identity that's extremely effective from that external perspective. But on the inside, it's more and more unsustainable. Okay, not because they're fake, but because reinforcement shaped that dynamic bit by bit. And that is a distinction that really matters, because if you misunderstand that system, you'll try solving it at the wrong layer. You'll look at motivation. I need to be more disciplined. I need to be more productive. I need to be more efficient. But the deeper issue is identity coherence, right? And once you lack that coherence and it starts destabilizing, everything is a lot heavier, even success, especially success. That brings us to section 6, the payoff. Okay. Now, here's the important part. Success rewiring identity is not automatically bad. Okay. Growth changes people, responsibility changes people. I'm a much different person now that I've got 2 kids depending on me. That's awesome. I love the new version of me that has those children and those relationships and those responsibilities. Experience does change people. That's normal. The real danger is unconscious identity construction, becoming somebody accidentally, like repeating a pattern that's rewarded often enough that you eventually forget you ever had a choice. That's the drift that I'm talking about. And once people see that clearly, another realization usually shows up like right behind it. A huge amount of identity drift begins the moment that somebody becomes deeply useful to everybody around them, because usefulness creates obligation expectations. And those expectations, repeated long enough, quietly reshape your identity too. So that's the next video. It's called The Hidden Cost of Becoming Useful. I'll see you there.